He knocked me over. I landed on the dog bowl.
This one's wife. Nobody opens bookstores. Losers do. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. You're undoubtedly aware that this one's wife appeared at a Monty Shitshow bookstore opening. Woo, that's a big ticket event, isn't it? However, it's worth learning more about what went on, and of course, this one's wife milks it for all that she can. It was reported in numerous newspapers that she was involved in this and that Oprah Winfrey was there, but a more fulsome account has now been provided by one of the supine publications. This time, the wheel of bullshittery PR was spun, and it landed on Town and Country as being the one that needed to advance quite a lengthy PR puff piece in relation to the opening event and, of course, this one's wife being there. The article was written by Elizabeth Holmes. No, not the deep-voiced psychopath that was convicted of fraud and thought that she was Steve Jobs, but a journalist that also writes for the New York Times. So that gives you an indication of which way this kind of article is going to go. The article explains this one's wife, the Duchess of Sussex, again, use of title that she still clings on to, stood at the front of a new bookstore in the oceanside enclave of Summerland, California over the weekend. Wow. Just brilliant being able to stand at the front of a new bookstore. There's no beginning to this woman's talents. And she recalled the last time she set foot in a similar spot. Well, look at this. What is the brilliant insight that this one's wife brings to the opening? A comprehensive knowledge of literary material? No. Incisive observations about the power of reading? No. Naturally, she has to make it all about her, and the best that she can come up with is, I'm going to tell you about another time I went to a bookshop. She's so fucking useless, isn't she? I mean, seriously. Next, she'll be opening some sparkling new toilet in a shopping mall, and she'll announce to everybody, I am delighted, humbled, and honoured to be at this authentic opening of the gentlemen's and ladies' toilets here at Spend Your Dollars Mall, Oklahoma. It puts me in mind of the time that I once went into a public convenience as a consequence of having some dodgy prawns, and rusty water was coming out of my ass. Which also caused me to think about washing my hands, and then I was thinking about soap suds. And when I was there washing my hands in that toilet 5 years ago, it made me remember that when I was 11, I wrote a letter to Procter & Gamble. You might not have heard about that, so I'll tell you the story about how I, as a young girl, single-handedly took on the mega corporation that is Procter & Gamble and won. You can well imagine the kind of bollocks that she would come out with. But it's demonstrative of the self-absorbed nature of this narcissist and the fact that she is just so dull and boring that when she turns up to open a bookstore, which in itself isn't exactly the heady heights of something major, all that she can do is tell you about the time that she went to a bookstore herself. It's always about her. More evolved, more sophisticated narcissists would be able to talk about the role of reading, they would talk about literary works, they talk about the power of information contained in books, they would perhaps talk about how they'd written a book. They would be able to expand and talk in a way which is engaging to the audience, but not this mid-range narcissist. The best that she can come up with is, I'm in a bookstore, so I'll tell you about the time I've been to a bookstore before. And of course, her narcissism makes her describe it as if this has never happened to anybody else before, that this is a major world event, that untalented beige woman goes to bookstore. Well, Town & Country unfortunately regales us with the fact that it was back in 2019 during a covert trip to New York from the UK to watch her friend, Serena Williams, play in the US Open. She stayed for a night in the West Village with another friend, designer Misha Nonu, so triangulation of the audience with these two people. Before anybody knew this one's wife was in town, she went for a walk to a bookstore. Wow! For me, sneaking to New York 5 years ago was a really big deal. Well, it would be for you because you think the universe revolves around you. You going to New York and going to a bookstore, nobody gives a rat's ass. She described how she put on a cap and kept her head down. She should be working for the Secret Service, shouldn't she? I was still so uncomfortable being out in the world. Horseshit! No, you weren't. You loved being out in the world. You're a narcissist. You love the attention. You love the fuel. But in actual fact, what you're doing is revising history to try and make people feel sorry for you back then. She was hinting at the fraught time in her tenure as a working royal, pity play. The safety of what I was craving, I knew I could find in a bookstore. What? First of all, you weren't uncomfortable being out in the world. That's a revision of history. Okay? But if you were uncomfortable, then why not stay with your security, which you'll have been provided with? Or, if it was really troublesome, you could go and find a police precinct. No. Instead, you go to a bookstore. Yeah, right. I'm sure, valuable viewers, that when you have found yourself in a predicament, you've thought to yourself, I'm being followed by somebody. This is making me rather nervous. I know. I'll find the nearest bookstore and then I'll feel safe. What a load of claptrap. But of course, it's an anecdote which is made up. It's a revision of history. If she was in New York, she may well have gone in a bookstore. But to suggest that she was uncomfortable being out in the world, bollocks. And that the safety of what I was craving, I knew I could find in a bookstore. Yeah, right. Now this one's wife has a new haven. Is it shaven? Just down the mountain from her Monty Shit Show home. Godmother's, the latest shop to open in this picturesque pocket of Santa Barbara County. It then describes where it is, and that it's the dream of celebrated literary agent Jennifer Rudolph Walsh and cosmetics mogul Victoria Jackson. We don't have a town square, but Victoria and I wanted to create one where people would come and feel welcome, Rudolph Walsh said. Fair enough. The idea of a neighbourhood gathering place hits differently in this Tony locale, where many bold-faced names have put down estate-sized roots. Consider the guest list for Godmother's opening weekend. Oprah Winfrey popped by the friends and family party Friday evening, holding court underneath the string lights on the patio. This one's wife was in the mix, naturally. Character traits to acquire, facade to manage, as was Prince Harry, silently pointing to his memoir Spare when asked if he had a book recommendation. Fucking clown. Ellen DeGeneres and Portia de Rossi, the usual suspects, made the rounds, as did Netflix co-CEO Ted Sarandos and his wife, Nicole Levant, former US ambassador to the Bahamas. So it's the usual faces. Since its inception, Godmother's has been sprinkled with that Monty Shit Show magic. The idea for the name started with Harry at his Beverly Hills book party. He thanked Winfrey, Jackson and Rudolph Walsh for their support, calling the trio his fairy godmothers. I wonder who told him to say that. When plans for the bookstore took shape, Winfrey took the new shopkeepers. There's really only one thing you can name it, Godmothers. Now the Duke's memoir features prominently on the store's Our Local Authors display. Another standard bookstore feature that gets a glow up here. This one's wife's children's book, The Bench, is part of the assortment, along with titles from Winfrey, DeGeneres, Rob Lowe, Cameron Diaz, and more. Really is a wankfest, isn't it? The interior of the store rises to its clientele, the structure taken down to the studs by designer Martin Lawrence Bullard. It then talks about the fireplace and sheepskin armchairs and photographs of prominent women, and there's a founder circle program, etc. All of that's not particularly relevant to the issue of this one's wife. Outside, a vintage Airstream serves as a food truck, helmed by a pair the founders call the Godsons, chef Miles Robbins, son of Paramount CEO Brian Robbins, and operations head Camille Jamail. The duo met at Ikoyi, the Michelin star restaurant in London. Food for the opening weekend offered a preview of the possible fare to come, with gourmet grilled cheese, fresh baked matcha and white chocolate chip cookies, and creamy soft serve. Now, this is my favourite part. Nobody opens bookstores, Jackson says with a laugh when we chat ahead of the weekend, acknowledging her latest venture is not the norm in 2024. Well, indeed. But this one's wife turns up to formally open it because such is her status, in that it has fallen so far that she is no longer called upon to perhaps be at the unveiling of a great piece of art or a statue, or at the opening of some educational facility. She opens bookstores now. Well, there we are. That just demonstrates again how she's nearing the turning up for the opening of an envelope, and that she continues to milk her status in order to try and make herself seem popular and interesting and relevant. The article goes on for quite some time. There's comment from Paramount's Robbins, who says the sense of community here is kind of wild. Jane Lynch says it's Maybury for rich people. And she was greeted enthusiastically Friday night by Jennifer Freed, a best-selling author and Gwyneth Paltrow's psychological astrologer, complimenting her blouse. And it really is an instance of people basically jerking one another off in one great, huge, famous circle jerk. That also continues by explaining, Lynch points to the unique intergenerational mix in the social scene evident in the Godmothers gatherings. There are the Monty Shit Show elders, of which Winfrey is queen, and then there is a younger cohort, many of whom are raising children there. Among this crew, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex stand out. Why? For their idiocy? For their grasping nature? Joined by the likes of Bumble's Whitney Wolfe Herd and Jamie Kern-Lima, founder of IT Cosmetics. True to its name, the bookstore wants to further the connection. What is Godmothers to us? Rudolph Walsh wonders aloud. It's somebody who roots for you, who supports you, who advocates for you. It's a bookstore, for God's sake. Later, she emphasises the importance of reciprocity. Many times, it's the younger person who's teaching the older person something. She recently joked with Harry ahead of the prince's upcoming birthday, once you turn 40, I've got to find new people in their 30s. That's a polite way of saying, bugger off, Ginger. I don't want to bother with you. On Friday, the twain mingled as the DJ took the evening soundtrack from Carole King to Chappelle Roan. The party was in full swing when the Sussexes arrived. Notice, turning up late again. Lack of accountability. Slipped out of a darkened Range Rover and into the evening Sunsplash store. This one's wife, clad in an ivory Ralph Lauren tank and long trousers. Notice the long trousers don't fit properly and she's cleaning the floor with them. And she wore a diamond necklace around her neck. She greeted people with kisses to both cheeks, assertion of control, while Harry turned handshakes into back-slapping hugs. At the end of the founder's brief remarks, as they thanked Winfrey for her support, this one's wife held her hand to her mouth and let out a woo. Jesus Christ. She is classless, isn't she? But notice that not only is that classless, she has to do it to bring attention to her. So the founders make their remarks. Rather than just clap politely, she has to do something which brings attention onto herself. So she puts her hand to her mouth and goes, woo, because then she's making a noise and people might turn to her. She just can't help herself. The Sussexes then spent an hour deep in several conversations, assertion of control, moving seamlessly from one group to the next. Their ease meant a lot to Jackson, who's known the couple since shortly after they moved to California in 2020. Seeing them be able to come here and be in a safe space. What? Why? Are there hordes of peasants outside with pitchforks and torches going, "Eat the rich, burn their houses down"? Of course not. It's what we want it to be. In turn, their support and the light that it will shine on godmothers is pretty extraordinary. It then talks about where the idea for godmothers came from. It talks about Jackson and Walsh's past as well. None of that particularly pertinent, of course, to this one's wife. It then continues, when starting a business, a bit of star power in your friend circle doesn't hurt. Winfrey headlined the Saturday afternoon lineup, offering a preview of the high-profile events Godmothers plans to host going forward. The beloved talk show host did what she has done to much acclaim for decades, steering a moving and memorable conversation. But instead of a global television audience or a packed convention hall, she spoke for just 100 or so people in Godmothers. Her guest was best-selling author Shaka Senghor, who went to jail at the age of 19 for murder. As Senghor shared the tribulations of his lengthy prison sentence, Winfrey artfully zeroed in on a detail of his story that tied back to the bookstore. "Can we talk about the moment that the real transformation began?" she said, teeing a letter he received in jail. "It came from a godmother." This one's wife was the only other VIP in the crowd filled with notable names to take the mic on Saturday. Well, of course, she's addicted to the mic like she's addicted to dick. Clad in a black linen Club Monaco jumpsuit, she thanked the founders for not just creating the space, but for holding the space, for so many people to feel seen, Jesus Christ, through the pages, either in laughter, in grief, in feeling less alone. What a load of tripe this woman talks. This one's wife listened intently to the conversations from the front row. She didn't. First from the store's founders, then Winfrey, nodding and applauding. When it wrapped, she made a dash for the door. "Wasn't that incredible?" she said, then added apologetically, "I've got to make dinner for the kids," which I've analysed elsewhere. Quite an extensive puff piece, which has got its tongue firmly wedged up the yitter of this one's wife. But it's quite entertaining to see that, whilst, of course, it's a posh bookshop, an upmarket bookshop, and it's got some celebs attending, at the end of the day, it's a bookshop. And this one's wife attends to the opening of it, demonstrating how far she's fallen, and once again demonstrating her crass behaviours and the necessity of making it all about her. Once again, her narcissism looms large, as we would expect. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.